you're going to keep dancing every time that's playing.
For those who don't know, you can see me at the bottom during the intro and I dance.
At least you do the head dance.
Welcome to our very last episode of Step Into the Story 2022. I'm Barbara Tanner Wallace. This is Donna Allward. For those of you who are not familiar with us, we're both authors who together, say it with me, Donna, we have written
100
books.
Approximately
100 books with top 5 publishers. And Step Into the Stories where we talk about reading and writing fiction, mostly historical fiction, because we happen to be moving into that genre.
And we love it. We love reading it.
Love it. And you'll find out just how much we talk about the channel. We've also got a Facebook community for readers and writers where we chat about books between YouTube appearances, and you are invited to join. It's at facebook.com/groups/stepintothestory.
Tis so. So last year we decided to do a reading challenge, and Renee was still with us at that time. So Renee Ryan, who's another historical fiction author, with a book coming up like next week. The three of us went together and came up with 6 titles we thought that everybody should read during the year along with us. And some of these were books that we were really looking forward to, and some were books we've been meaning to read and hadn't yet. So we each picked 2 with the idea that we were sort of challenging each other to check out the books that we might not have otherwise read. So yay for us. We read all 6 books, and hopefully some of our followers did the same.
How many books did you read all told this year, Donna?
56.
Okay, beat me. I think I read 48 or 49.
Well, and to be fair, probably close to 10 of those were probably books that I edited at some level that are now published. Oh, so I counted those. Like when I do my Goodreads challenge, I count those because I do read them. I read them before they, and then
I feel less bad now. I kept up.
Yeah. So we're going to take a quick look at the titles and share our impressions, and also talk about our favorite books of the year.
I don't know why we can't get both of us up here, but we'll do it. There we go.
All right.
Wouldn't be a show without a technical problem. So let's get started. Let's talk about the challenge as a whole. Is it safe to say you loved all 6 books? Because I did.
I liked all 6 books and loved a couple. Like they were not all 6 would make my top favorites for the year, but there was none of them that I didn't enjoy reading.
That's a good way to put it. I really liked all of them. There were a couple that I was like, oh, I'm so glad I read this.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. What would you say was your favorite? Actually, before we go there, was there any that you were really looking forward to before you started the challenge? Like, oh, I got to read this.
Yeah, The Diamond Die, and that was one of my picks. And I was like, there's no question I'm going to read this. And it's also going to be a big book for the year. So The Diamond Die by Kate Quinn, and I pre-ordered it way ahead of time.
So. Okay. See, for me, it was Clark and Division.
Yep.
And it's funny story is I was at the time I was still working at Barnes & Noble. I was running the book club there, and we were reading a thriller or a mystery that no one liked. And they were all mad because they're like, why couldn't we have read Clark and Division? We heard that's really good. And I had never heard of it. So I went and looked it up, and I read the back. I'm like, yeah, it does sound really good. So I was really excited to read that because it dealt with the Japanese internment, and it had a murder in it. And it was an amateur sleuth. It had kind of all the right pieces. So I was really, really excited about that one.
Yeah. And so, those are the ones we were excited about before we read them. So did that end up being your favorite, or did you have something else that was a favorite?
My absolute favorite was The Diamond Die.
Yep.
Kate Quinn is probably one of the best in the business right now.
Yeah.
So, I have to be funny. She redeemed herself because I wasn't that crazy about the Rose Code. So she redeemed herself in this one for me. I couldn't put it down. And, a book about the Russian sniper during World War II and a lot of tactical and technical information. You would think you wouldn't, but, hold your interest, but I couldn't get enough of it.
Right. So. Right. And I think too, for that book in particular, like you said, the research part of it, but able to give all of that information in a way that doesn't feel like she's dumping it in there and giving you a lesson. Like, she's just masterful at that.
It
So
was. There was no dumping. It was just how she, it just described the woman's life. And she made the woman sound very human.
yeah, I think if I were to pick a favorite, I think it would either be that one or possibly the Mayfair Bookshop.
Oh,
Which,
really?
and it's one of those things where when I read it, I was like, oh, I really, really like that. And that's Eliza Knight's book. And I was like, oh, I really, really like that. But then as the year went on, I just keep like, I'll go back and I'll think about it again, or like it's really stuck with me. So I think I'd have to put that, sort of right toward the top of the list.
It
And I
was,
think it was,
oh, go
I
ahead.
think it was, I think it was just like it's of course Nancy Mitford, but I think because she was her depiction of Nancy was, the Mitfords were very sort of glamorous and famous and notorious, and but Nancy also had sort of she was very relatable in that she didn't necessarily lead as glamorous a lifestyle as perhaps other members of her family, and she was, volunteering and I don't know. I found her very relatable, and yet sort of there was still sort of this scandal and stuff going on with her family. So I don't know. That really stuck with me.
I would say that was the biggest surprise for me because you know that I kept saying she's writing about the wrong Mitford. And I can't remember because like, the other sisters did all these things, like one dated Hitler. And
hard to make her a heroine, though.
No, it ended up being a really good book and a really identifiable heroine. And
yeah,
this was a really nice surprise. And I know Elijah's got one coming out and about Adele Astaire, and I'm like, definitely on my gonna read list.
Right, and for me, and again, we've talked about this several times during the year about how we don't always go for like a biographical hisfic, like about a real person. For me to pick that one and be like, yeah, and then be like, ooh, her next one, I think that's a testament as to how well she handled that. So, because I'm looking at, I think we have that book on our on our radar for this year, her new book.
Yeah, and she's got one coming out. I know that she mentioned it. She's writing about Queen Elizabeth's corgis.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, you know what? She's going to be writing about dogs. That's
Susan, right? Isn't it Susan, the corgi?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to reading this story that I think is from the dog's point of view. And so yeah, Eliza Knight. This was her historical fiction debut. She's been around for a while writing other things. She's written some mystery, I think, and she's written romance. This was her historical fiction debut, and she definitely won me on.
Did a good job.
An auto buy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So of our 6 books, or 5 of the 6 books actually were World War II books. Now I know you're a World War II slut sort of man. It's all World War II all the time for you.
Total tramp, you bet.
But I thought it was interesting because they all had a very different tone. I mean, they all took a slightly different angle about World War II. I mean, the Mayfair Bookshop's about the home front. Clark and Division is about the internment. Then you have the Diamond Eye, which is about the Russian front. And Lost Book of Eleanor Dare is about the home front again. Let's talk for a minute, though, about All the Light We Cannot See, because of the 6, you picked this one. And it was definitely one of those books that was shame on me for not have reading it yet because it won the Pulitzer.
Well, and that was part of the reason why I picked it, was that I kept hearing all these things about it. And then I remember when it first came out and seeing that cover and just loving the cover so much and thinking, why haven't I bought this yet? So that was sort of my dark horse that I brought in that was backlist.
And what did you think of it when you finally read it?
I think it was just so stunningly beautifully written. Like the writing is just beautiful. And I think there's definitely an extra challenge in having one of your protagonists be blind. And I was thinking about this when we were putting together the stuff for today and thinking, even though she was blind, the way he wrote her point of view, I could still visualize everything.
Yep.
Like it was really, when you think about that, he's describing it using other senses, and yet I could see it. So there's really something neat about that. So, I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful book.
It is. I thought there's 2 characters for people who want to pick it up, there's two characters. There's a blind heroine and there's a young German boy, and they're linked together, even though it's during a war.
Yeah.
And the German boy, Werner, his story is so heartbreaking. And I said, this is the second book this year that has made me feel bad for a German during World War II.
Yeah.
And I wanted him to have a happy ending so badly.
Yeah.
So disillusioned, and you knew that had there not been a war, he would have been a totally different person and lived a totally different life.
But who he was deep down did come out in the end. So
oh yeah, no, and I cried.
But yeah, if you're expecting a warm and fuzzy happy ending,
no,
this isn't the book for you. But if you are, I think the ending, however, is still really, really appropriate.
Oh yeah,
and I think it suits the story, and I think it's, I think it works for the story. So I was okay with it.
Yeah, it of all the books, I think it was the one that's the writing stuck with me the most. It interfered with my writing because his voice is so amazingly strong and beautiful that I had trouble shaking it off. I mean, it's hard enough when you're into a book to shake off the voice, but when something is that strong, it was hard. So that one was really, really hard.
I was also writing when I was reading that book, and I have to say I didn't have any voice creep because the voice is just so very, very different. And also, I don't think I will ever necessarily write to that level.
Oh, I don't think.
So I didn't worry about it.
Full surprise level.
Right. So did any of the books on the list surprise you?
Yeah, I think Clark, like I said, Clark and Division was a very pleasant surprise. Because I wasn't expecting it. It's a series, and it's going to be a detective series. And
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, these characters are coming back.
Oh,
and I think that's why I was like, oh wow, I didn't realize she was like so much world building, and I'm like, because she had all these side characters coming in, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a beginning of a series. She's going to be like this amateur sleuth during World War II, and I'm like, how original, because it's a Japanese American right at the end of, they're still fighting World War II. She's got a fiance over there fighting. And it was a really pleasant surprise because I'm like, oh, now I have to read the series. Yeah. So I was excited. And it's also, I think I said this numerous times, it's a really good argument for why own voices is so important.
Yes.
Because I don't think anyone but a Japanese American or an Asian American could write about the prejudice that, because it was woven in, versus I think that white authors have a tendency to not be as subtle about it, and therefore people tune it out. Whereas this was woven into the experience, and it resonated more, and you really felt for these characters because you saw you felt what they were experiencing versus being told what they were experiencing.
Well, and it wasn't just external either. And I will say that Clark and Division was the surprise for me too, because I had not heard anything about it, and you put it on the list, and then we were talking about this, and you said about own voices, and I was like, yes. And then the other thing that really got me about that isn't just the racism that they faced from outside. I mean, it actually goes through the beginning of the book. Actually goes through the time when they're interned in California, very quickly, and then it moves to Chicago, but it's not just how the outside world treats them, but when she's trying to get to the bottom of what has happened. She also faces pushback from her parents.
Yep.
Based on their culture. And so it's, she's kind of caught between the way the outside world treats Japanese Americans and then the cultural expectations and the way that she was brought up. And then, trying to find her own way. And I don't think anybody who didn't have that experience or that, again, the own voices thing, I think that really, this book deserved way more buzz than it got. I think.
Yeah, I was really disappointed that it wasn't getting any buzz.
Yeah. So I would say that was probably my biggest surprise. And then the other surprise for me was The Lost Book of Eleanor Dare.
I love that book.
And that would be because I actually expected the story to be a lot more about the lost colony.
I did too.
And I didn't realize that it would take place, during World War II, and so that was the time setting was actually a bit of a surprise for me. But I really like the Southern feel in that. And
Yeah.
there's a little bit of, there wasn't really mysticism in it, but it still had that little bit of feeling to it. So
It felt like a Southern Gothic, I think is the best way
yeah,
to put it. Like,
yeah.
it unfolded very languidly.
Languid is the perfect word. Thank you.
Yeah, it was slow, but like in a summer day, kind of, you don't want to move too fast kind of way.
Yeah, languid is the perfect word for that.
Yeah, I enjoyed that a lot. What's that?
I said thank you because
you're welcome. As I have trouble pronouncing it, but I could write it.
All right. So thoughts on Lost Summers? I know
that's the only one we haven't covered, right? I love every single one of these authors. Beatrice Williams and Lauren Willig have been huge fan of theirs forever. And Karen White, I'm kind of a new convert to. So I think they're great. I liked it. It was not like oh my God, I loved it, but I really enjoyed it. And it was like the perfect beach read, which is I think the whole point of the thing. I got it during the summer and it was a really good beach read and it was fun. The mystery kind of held me. They had a good mystery to it. So
yeah, I thought it was paced really well.
Yeah. And it is, for 3 people writing in 3 different locations, they did a seamless job of putting those storylines together.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, when you look at something I noticed, because I pretty much assumed that one author takes on one of the storylines, right? So when you look at chapter endings and then chapter beginnings and those transitions, they were done really, really well, even though it would be transitioning to a different author and storyline. So that's
I went to see them at a talk at Newport, and they said they do it round robin, where one person wrote the chapter and then emailed it to the next person, and they just kind of did around and around. So I think that was why it was so well transitioned. It would have been very interesting to let these 3 women take those characters and do a whole story, a whole novel, because I think that, and I think that was the thing. These were so deeply emotionally complex characters, and then they didn't have the room to do what they do best.
Yeah, maybe. So which storyline was your favorite?
If you gave all of them if you gave all of them 300 pages, they would have been able to really plumb what they did. My favorite was the 1950s storyline.
Yeah, Lucky.
Lucky. Although I really did enjoy the Gilded Age one too, where he bought her a hat and it caused a scandal.
Ellen, yeah. Lucky was my favorite. She was just so spunky.
Yeah.
And so I liked her a lot.
And I liked the premise of them finding the skeletons, like literal skeletons.
Yeah.
During a renovation, during a reality show. I did like the premise.
It was neat too, because if you're a fan of Karen's Trad Street books, there's a little Easter egg in there.
There is?
Yeah. So when she talks about Melanie from Charleston, that's the character from The House on Trad Street.
Oh, did not know that.
Yeah. So if you're a fan of Karen, you might have noticed that in there. So, because when I read it, I was like, clever. Anyway, it's kind of cute.
So, and I shouldn't say, I mean, I loved all of these books, so it's not a case of like, when I say it's like I didn't love it maybe as much as I loved something else, but I liked it a lot. So,
but
I don't want to pick on 3 of my favorite authors. So
right, and let's face it, those authors are auto-buy authors for us anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So,
like I said, I think it was a case of the thing that I felt was it didn't have the depth that their individual books have, because they weren't allowed to do what they do best. And these women do wonderful character-driven books.
Yeah.
And had they been able to really take 300 pages, I think you would have had 3 amazing page turners, because they did a great job with in the confines of the short story. I just think that they tend to write very complex people.
Yeah.
And that it's just hard. And then if that nothing they did, it's just hard because of having a short format.
Well, and that's actually a challenge in writing dual timeline books or triple timeline books.
Exactly.
Sorry. In the first place, even if you're just one author trying to do
That's
that,
true.
right?
That's true. It is very hard.
All right. Well, I did enjoy doing the challenge overall. Enough that, and I think you did too, enough that we're going to do it again in 2023. We're going to announce those books probably next week. Yes.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think so.
On the Facebook page. Yeah, so hopefully we'll have some community members join us with that. And
I think that we talked a little bit about it, and just so you know, not all of them are available right now. There's some that are coming out, which is actually kind of the things that we were really looking forward to. So it's coincidentally books Donna and Barb are really looking forward to reading challenge.
Right. Right. And the thing is, okay, so for those people watching, Barb and I had this whole like meeting last week or the week before where we're like, okay, what are we going to do for our featured authors? What are we going to do for like our deep dive books for the first 6 months of the year? And then, I mean, we've had this massive list of books that we're looking forward to. And then we're like, okay, so what are we going to do for the reading challenge? And so we kind of picked a whole bunch of books. We're going to have some good reading this coming year.
Really good reading. The problem is, I think if we read that whole list, we'd have to have read like 102 books, and I don't know if I can.
Yeah, it's a little bit bananas. And I know there's going to be other books that are, well, and the books that we listed on our list, a lot of them only go up to like July, and we haven't even listed anything that's releasing from like August on.
No, we haven't.
It's going to be, excuse me, a good year for reading.
If you're an historical fiction fan, it's going to be a fantastic year.
Right.
I think every auto-buy author has a book out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. So we are going to announce those on the Facebook page. So in groups / step into the story. And then we're going to list them where else, Barb?
I'm sorry? Oh, on our webpage.
Right. And we have a Goodreads page.
Oh, that's right. We do have
a Goodreads bookshop, and our bookshop.org. So all of those, we'll link to all of those on our website and in the Facebook group, and I'll put them in the comments, that kind of thing. So you can see where we are.
We'd really love if people read along with us.
Yeah. All right. So when it comes to the 49 books that you read this year, what are your top 2 or 3?
Top 2 or 3 would be Dime and Die.
Yep.
The Stolen Book of Evelyn Aubrey.
Okay, so you have to tell us a little bit about that one too.
Okay, that is the story of, it's a dual timeline. It's 2 women who are kind of searching for themselves. Evelyn Aubrey is obviously one of the timelines. It's the turn of the century. She's married to a published author who begins taking her writing and passing it off as his own. And she plots her revenge. It's a lot about women and how little agency they had and how little voice they had back then.
Bastard.
And then the modern storyline is her ancestor who finds out that she's an ancestor and goes searching for the secrets.
I love it.
Yeah, it's really, really well done. And matter of fact, coincidentally, Serena Burdick's going to be on as a featured author next month. And I'm going to gush a little bit, but it was really well done. And then my absolute favorite was a book called The Measure by Nikki.
Right.
Yeah, by Nikki Erlickson, I think it is.
Yep.
Which was about everyone in the world when they turn 21 inherits a measure of rope in a box, and it can be a short load or a long one, and based on the length of the string is how long you have to live, and you cannot change that. No matter what you do, it stays the same. So people who get a long string, they could like jump off buildings. They will live and have that long string. People who have short strings, there's nothing you can do. You're going to die young. And it affects a lot of things. It affects crime. It affects how they view poverty. It affects how they handle the Department of Defense. And she weaves that a lot in and uses kind of as a metaphor for race.
Yeah.
And it's really power and how people make decisions in their lives. And it's really a fascinating read. And I loved it. It was really the people were really real in it, and you kind of cry at the end at some of the endings, and you're like, no, that's not fair. And it's just, oh, it's wonderful. So,
all right. So what's your third one?
Well, those were my three. Diamond
Eye.
I did Diamond Eye, Evelyn Aubrey, and
and The Measure. Right. Sorry. You're right. I got so caught up there. I totally lost it for a second. So Diamond Eye would be in my top three as well.
Yeah.
The most fun I had reading a book was Dear Mrs. Bird.
Yeah, you loved that book.
I loved that book. I loved it because the main character was so endearing, and you just got to love her. And there were several laugh out loud moments. It was really witty and great dialogue and a little bit quirky.
It was really different, which was
cute. And then
really good read because we read it right after some Vanessa Riley, who's a great writer. But it was
some heavier stuff, and it was just this most lovely, bubbly palate cleanser, but not without substance. Because when you get to a certain point in the book, things get it's taking place during war. Things are serious, but it takes a very personal, serious turn. And I cried 3 times in this book, but at the same time, I could turn the page for another scene and find myself laughing at something again. So for me, that was just such an enjoyable experience. And then characters I loved the most, sort of as a cast, would probably be the Bloomsbury Girls by Natalie Jenner.
Oh, that was a good one.
Yeah, who is incidentally also a Canadian. And I think we both read that when we were in Florida, did we not?
I think I passed it on to you when I was done, yeah.
Yeah, and it was so good. And so I have an honorable mention too as a fourth read, and it was also something that we read. And I read it in Florida, and then I passed it to you, and you read it.
We swapped plane reading, yeah.
Yeah, and it was Beyond the Moonlit Sea by Julianne.
Also,
which is more of a women's fiction rather than necessarily historical fiction.
But wicked twisty.
A little bit twisty and just interesting and unexpected, and a page turner. So I really enjoyed Beyond the Moonlit Sea by Julianne.
Yeah, she was good.
I mean, I could have picked probably 10 books out of my 50-some that I just really loved.
There were only a couple that I really hated, and they're listed as do not finish on Goodreads, and I will not give their names. But
and
what I talked about on this show, I'll tell you that.
Right. Well, and I probably did 3 or 4 that I really didn't enjoy, and so but for the most part, I had some really fantastic reads this year.
There were.
It was really fantastic ones.
It was a good year, and a lot of new voices that I hadn't read before, a lot of debut
authors.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, a few auto-buys, but then a whole bunch of brand new authors that I hadn't read before. So yeah.
So that is it. We are done for 2022.
We are. We're coming back.
Appreciate everyone sticking around for us, sticking around all year.
Yeah, and hopefully sticking around for 2023, because we'll be back on January 3rd with Renee Ryan to talk about The Secret Society of Salzburg, which is coming out on December 27th. So she's going to join us. We're going to drill her about the book. And so if anyone has questions that they want to us to ask her, we may be pre-taping, I think, just because of scheduling. Send them along, and we can try to cover them during the broadcast. And so I'm excited about that because
I am too.
Yeah.
Yes, she's our friend and we're biased, but Widows of Champagne was a fabulous book.
Fantastic.
And I'm really looking forward to reading this one.
Me too. I have high hopes. It's actually as soon as tomorrow I get to start reading a new book, and that is it.
Yeah, it's the one. It might be the one I read after All the Light We Cannot See too. So you get to follow Anthony Doerr. There you go, Renee. That's because she's actually, I would say she's a good follow-up to that.
Well, actually, when she wrote The Widows of Champagne, I had read The Nightingale probably 6 months before, and I was like, Renee, this just reminds me of The Nightingale, and I love it. And it's I really felt like she could stand up next to Kristen Hanna, which I think is a huge compliment. So
I think she sets a high bar for a lot.
Yeah.
All right. So then on January 17th, I'm going to be posting an interview with Serena Burdick, who, like I said, did The Lost Book of Evelyn Aubrey. I will be gushing because I thought it was really well written. And there's a really cool backstory to that, and how long it took her to publish it. And it was
that's a neat story.
Yeah, it took her, over a decade to get this book published. No, so and she's published a lot of books in between, but this was a book of her heart, and it's really, really an interesting story. So I hope you'll tune in for that one too.
If you like watching our show, subscribe to our channel on YouTube and join our community on Facebook. We're always looking for new people, new conversations. And in the meantime, no matter what you're celebrating, we hope you have a terrific holiday. We're going to go eat lots of turkey and mince pies and drink lots of wine and just spend time with family, I think, is what we're planning for the next week or so. Yes?
Yes.
All right.
We will see everyone in 2023.
You bet. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everybody.